to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers, someone suggested that I do a bookshelf tour, which I think is kind of fun because my bookshelf now is a little different than it has been in the past, which is what you see in the Greenwald videos. But at the same time, each of these has a story to tell. And so there are reasons that I've kept some or gotten rid of others. And I'm not the kind of person who keeps a lot of physical books or acquires a lot of physical books. I've moved a few times. And so I don't have an expansive physical library. I keep more of a digital presence for especially research heavy topics or things that I'm, just touching on briefly or, otherwise I don't need to have the physical thing in my hand. So that's what you'll see here, which is kind of funny. But because of that, that means that the ones that I do have are that much more meaningful. So I think this will be kind of fun. So to begin with, of course, I have a, shelf here of not only, my book, which is kind of up front and center if anybody wants to talk about that, but also the works that I use the most frequently from Meister Eckhart. And so you'll see a lot of his, translations figured prominently here in the beginning. But what you notice on the end is kind of funny, and I did this on purpose. I have a book, In Search of Schrodinger's Cat, which is meant to be a conversation starter or at least a kind of social filter so that when someone comes by, if they have, some interest in that or find it interesting, then they're probably going to be an interesting person to talk to. And so I think that's kind of fun to get things started. So I've got that. You'll see a lot of the works of Eckhart here in the beginning, which these are the ones that I use the most frequently, as you might imagine. I mean, Walsh is a useful piece. You see Cyprian Smith there as well, which is, of course, one of my favorites. I have the Middle High German. This is the only Middle High German, not dictionary, but even primer on that, which Walsh modified from earlier in the 20th century. And then some of these are missing because I'm actually using them. So Meister Eckhart's, first volume from Miss Smith's translations, I'm currently using that, as you may know, with some of the videos that I've done. So that's not here. That's at home. And the one that you can't see here very well, this is Blakeney's translation of Meister Eckhart's works from the 1940s. So a lot of these books are out of print, and I could only come by them used, which is why you see, some of them have library stamps where the library gave up on them and sold them to me. But anyway, so that's kind of fun. You also notice that I have Mangin's translations here from the French, which is wonderful. It's also falling apart. The book cover's falling off of it. And what's funny about this one, and this is true for a lot of the works that have been named recently, so the actual titles of the works kind of mystify me. In this case, sermons, treatise, and poem. You got this giant work. The poem is like one page, but yet it's part of the title. I don't really understand that. And the same thing is here, and this is much worse. The Complete Mystical Works of Meister Eckhart from Maurice O'Connell Walsh. This is a fabulous work. At the same time, it's not new in the sense that it's a compilation of his older translations. And it's also not complete in any meaningful sense. I mean, it's only some of the sermons. There are several that are missing that I translated. They're in my book here. So I tried to make up for some of the gaps. And, that's just kind of strange. I don't know how that ever happened with Crossroads, but anyway, so that's there. The rest of the stuff that you see over here, I mean, these are all my, notebooks. And so I do a lot of writing and have for, many, many, many years. And, the different sizes and shapes and whatnot, are an indication of what I was doing at the time. These are from when I was working on my dissertation, and the others are just, from who knows when over the past several decades. So there's that. Now, the older stuff that's over here is kind of interesting because this is my section on comparative mythology. And you'll notice that Joseph Campbell is figured prominently. And he's the one, of course, who got me into, intellectual activity in general. And that's my start in philosophy and religion. And so I have a lot of his works here. And actually, I don't see the most important one. I don't see the very first book that I ever picked up in philosophy. I think it's elsewhere on the shelf, or I may have taken it home. Hopefully I'll run across that in a minute. But you'll see, Campbell and then Levi-Strauss. Of course, I've got a bunch of his. There's one of the Dalai Lama's books in there, and a little bit on Zen and Buddhism. The Corpus Hermeticum, so this is just a reference book, really. I have a few that are in here that are like that. and others I've used in classes and whatnot. Fraser, it's nice to have a copy of The Golden Bough. And then Louis Dumont's Homo Hierarchicus. I end up talking about that book a lot with people who come by, which is kind of funny how often that comes up. The idea that we naturally stratify ourselves into, social castes and levels and whatnot. That's really kind of interesting. So beyond that, as we move down here, these are less accessible, and so I don't see them quite as much, but they tell kind of an interesting story as well. So some of these I've thought about using for class before, or I actually have used for classes in the past. Poe is a funny one because I tried to write an article on Poe at one point, and that was my amusing experience with a journal in English, so in literature, where they, the gates in terms of the gatekeeping for you have to cite the right sources and the right people became very evident when I got the reviewers' comments back from that. I thought I had something interesting in commenting on, in particular, the Ligeia. But yeah, that was not my home discipline. I've published in several different disciplines, but that one I never followed up with. And so I never ended up getting that published. It's still in draft. And then, of course, you see Twain. I mean, I love Twain. I've, been an admirer not only of his thought, but really the way he writes. He is one of the best writers in the English language, in my opinion. So Hannah Arendt, of course, which I talked about in a recent video. And then quantum theory. This is funny. I've got this one, and then there's another one called The Math of Quantum Theory, which I had a wild hair that I was going to learn that a number of years ago, and got a little ways into it and realized it was going to take forever. And so I ended up just continuing as an admirer of physics rather than someone who was more actively involved in it. And that's why you see the Feynman lectures down here as well. Those are the best lectures on physics in the English language, in my opinion. That's what I always point people toward when they're going to take physics at the college level. Read Feynman first. I think he'll make your life more enjoyable, not just easier, but more enjoyable. And then we've got a bunch of, textbooks and stuff down there. So up here, this is kind of funny. These are more of the works that I actually use on a regular basis. So you'll see a lot of works that I use for class. So, that's the Bloom translation of Plato that I use. And then Saunders and Allen and the others in that series I use for my classes. Origin was important. That was the source text that I used when I was dissertating. And then Huston Smith, of course, I love. Now, you'll see a lot of McGinn's work here as well. And Bernard McGinn is an important figure in the history of, the study of Christian mysticism, the Western mysticism. And I made it a point to try and work through as much as I possibly could of his work. Now, at the same time, we don't see eye to eye on a very important foundational concept of thinking about the history of Christian mysticism, which is in particular something that, it's like the very beginning of volume 1, he gets to this, where he considers mysticism to be a heterogeneous thing, so that it is not a unitary phenomenon. Whereas I made a point of saying in Paradox at Play that there is one mysticism, there is a unitary thing, because if it could be different, then it wouldn't be mysticism. So I haven't actually talked with Professor McGinn about that, but I would love to at some point. So let's see, some others here. Of course, a couple of the Loeb editions of Dual Language, which those are kind of fun. And then here we have some of my publications. So this is actually the journal that contains my article from a number of years ago. And then this is one of the books. I have a chapter in this book that I did on Zen and religious tolerance. So that's an interesting one. That was from a few years ago. And then some other scattered books on Eckhart, of course. So let's see, these are more along the lines of reference material. So we're kind of moving into that section here of things that I've used in the past for that, which is kind of fun. My favorite version of the Tao Te Ching, John C.H. Wu, which I use in class. And then down here, moving into more of the, philosophy section. And then also with Jung, I have a couple of his volumes on specifically the archetypes of the unconscious and other, pieces that I find great utility for. I thought about getting more into Jung. I had, applied to a conference to present and talk on a panel with Jung a number of years ago, but that's something that I never continued too far in the psychoanalytic direction. So I may get back to that in the past. And then you see some difficult ones in here, like Deleuze has a couple of different places. And then, of course, Goethe and some literature. One of my favorites, of course, James Joyce. There was Ulysses. I don't know where my other copies of Joyce are. They have been scattered. This is kind of fun. So this is my dissertation. This was one of the versions of it. I don't know if that was the one that was marked up, but I'm afraid to pull it out because papers may fall everywhere. And then you've got, old class notes, most of which are not here because they're actively being converted to digital right now. Then I have some of my art stuff. So I do a lot of work with oil painting, and so I have some books on that, most of which aren't here, but some of them are. Let's see. And then a little bit more Campbell, and then some scattered stuff here towards the bottom. So that's about about as much as I have in any kind of reasonable sense of organization. So I hope this is cool. Thank you to everyone for getting us to 1,000, and I look forward to doing more of this. So talk with you soon.